Hi, my name is Janice. Today I'm going to be talking a lot about trauma and resiliency. The current model that I'm going to be discussing at length is the Community Resiliency Model, also known as CRM, also known as CRIM. Now, this model in particular is super accessible. It's affordable. It kind of allows you to take your own healing into your own hands with a clinician, and you get to take the skills learned home with you so that you're able to tap into those skills, resources, and coping abilities at any time. So to begin, CRM is really valuable for those who've experienced trauma. And trauma can be a myriad of things. There could be big T trauma, which is something like war, big events that are traumatic in someone's life, witnessing or almost dying yourself, along those lines. There's also little T trauma, which everybody has experienced. No matter who you are, there's been trauma in your life. Even think about when you're a baby coming out of the womb. That's a traumatic experience. So even babies, I feel like we come into this world already having a little bit of trauma in us. So the community resiliency model, it can be called lots of different things. Some people don't like the word resiliency. They feel like it is a word that's stuck on them, and they prefer different words. So if I were working with you, I would kind of go through the model and ask you what word felt most appropriate to you or felt most meaningful to you. So to begin, I'm going to start out by talking about the resiliency zone. So the resiliency zone, basically, if we're looking at a graph, it's basically your mid-range right here where you feel like you are at optimum efficiency as a human. There can be ups and downs because we know that healing in life is not just linear, right? We know that we have ups and downs, but staying within this resiliency zone is what our goal is. So I have a little model for you to show you just what I mean. So in this graphic, we can see that little parallel line like I showed you. So in the middle there, that is the resilient zone. Now, if you were to go above the resilient zone, it's like the high zone. That's when you're panicked, your heart rate is up, you're in a state of flight, fright, freeze. All of those things are happening when that traumatic event happens and you escalate. Right? And the low zone is also a trauma response, but the low zone has to do with depression. If you feel like you're stuck, when you feel depressed, when you feel really low energy. And so the goal is to use skills, and I'm going to go into one in a minute, but the goal is to remain in that resiliency zone, that okay zone, that balance zone, that good zone, whatever you want to call this zone, to keep you in balance with your emotions, regulated and stabilized emotionally, physically, and all else. We want to stay in that resiliency zone. Okay, so say a traumatic incident happens. I have another little slide for you to see. So say a traumatic incident happens, which is shown here with this lightning bolt, okay? You can notice that there can be shifts up, down, because of one trauma. It doesn't have to be that you have the same trauma experience every time. Complex trauma and people who experience trauma they can have it, they can showcase it, and behaviors can manifest in lots of different ways. So as I said, if you're stuck in the high zone, you may be feeling like you're edgy, irritable, you're experiencing mania, anxiety and panic attacks, or angry outbursts. Sometimes people don't really see anger as a trauma response, but it is. And then if you're stuck in the low zone, there's depression, sadness, feelings of isolation, exhaustion, fatigue, or even numbness, feeling like you're not feeling. And that's also a trauma response. And that's something that I personally had to work through, because when you've experienced trauma or complex trauma, sometimes you're so disassociated and disconnected from your body that it's hard to feel sensations. It's hard to name emotions. It's hard to kind of experience what's going on in your body because maybe your body wasn't a safe place. Maybe you had to kind of go outside of yourself and, make up a fantasy world in your head. That's what I did as a survival tool. And really what you're doing when you're stuck in the high zone or the low zone, you're coping. Even if it doesn't look like how you want it to look like, even if that looks like you being really irritable and angry, that's just your emotions. That's just your feelings and how your trauma is manifesting for you. So there's some things that you can do within the community resiliency model, CRM, to help kind of bring you back to yourself, or to disengage from being in the high zone, or to kind of engage yourself more to being from the low zone into the resiliency zone. So one thing that I'm going to talk about today is resourcing. So resourcing, you're like, what does that mean? When I think of resources, I think of like mining the earth for coal. Not what I mean here. So resourcing is basically having the skill and the ability to tap into memories that you have or knowledge that you have that brings you to a different place emotionally than you were prior to resourcing. So say someone is experiencing panic, anxiety, they're really up here in the high zone, and we need them to kind of come back down to earth with us and kind of bring yourself to a place of being relaxed and being a little bit more calmed down. One thing we don't tell someone is to just relax. Don't do that. That's not helpful. So resourcing could be as simple as having a client or someone that's experiencing something in the high or low zone to close their eyes, invite them to close their eyes, put their hand on their heart, get them connected into their body. And depending on the situation, you can ask them a range of different questions to bring up memories. One thing you can do is say they're struggling with feeling worthless. One thing you can do is say, can you think of a time when you felt really accomplished or you felt like you were really shining? I want you to go ahead, take a moment and think about that time in your life. And as you're sitting there, just letting them come up with the memory and then asking them questions about it. In that day, what was the weather like outside? What were you wearing? How did that feel for you? How does it make you feel right now? And the same can be said if the client is really depressed or really having a hard time seeing any light within them, outside of them. Another thing you can ask is, can you think back to a time when you just felt bright? You were happy. Can you think of a time where you felt so fulfilled, or you felt like just part of you was tingling from joy? Can you remember a time like that in your life? And having them kind of sit, reflect, be in that moment with themselves to know that they have had that experience before. And in doing that, instead of feeling the feelings that they're currently feeling, which are either really high or really low, it can bring them to a place of remembering joy. And typically when you recall or resource these memories, depending on what they are, you might be able to see a change in the affect of the person. You may be able to, even if their eyes are closed, you may be able to see them take a deeper breath or slightly smile if they're thinking of something like their family. Or if you invite them to think of a time when they felt safe or protected, maybe they breathe a little bit easier. Maybe their affect changes with a little smile, or they giggle. And that's something that they could use even outside of sessions. That's something that they can draw on whenever. They can be at home and realize that they're experiencing a panic attack or they're feeling really depressed. Resourcing is something that they can do any time of the day, alone, with people, to help remind them that they can bring themselves back to the resiliency zone. So that was my lesson today. We learned about the community resiliency model, which is all about affordability, accessibility, bringing healing and hope to people within different zones, high, resiliency, or low. We talked about that, about what trauma does when it comes in and it makes us spike up and down. And also one skill, resourcing, to help us think of more relaxed times, better times, happier times, to help us kind of get in and engage with ourselves in a positive way. So again, I'm Janice, and thank you for watching.